I watched the new documentary, The Age of Disclosure, which is a documentary about UAP disclosure, released November 21st of this year, produced, I believe, by the Fallen Angel Club. The actors in this documentary that are interviewed, they all worked for the U.S. government in some capacity. U.S. military officers, intelligence community people, politicians, and scientists. Some of these actors have also been paraded all over the news talking about UAPs, and some were involved in the congressional hearings about UAPs. So I guess it wasn't enough propaganda with the news and the congressional hearings, and now they have to make a documentary about it also. So they're really pushing hard for so-called disclosure of UAPs and entities. And there must be a reason they're doing this, but what is it? There were suggestions that these entities were crypto-terrestrial beings, perhaps ancient civilizations, under the earth or from the sea, is what they said in the documentary. And this is the same thing that the Harvard researchers said, including a director, when they published their paper last year. They said these crypto-terrestrials could be or could have come to Earth from a different time period, or they could be a remnant of an ancient civilization largely destroyed long ago, possibly by a flood, something likened to earthbound angels, creatures perhaps of a magical supernatural origin like fairies, elves, and nymphs, and concealing themselves in distinct stealth. Those are direct quotes from that Harvard paper. The people in the documentary also said that they could possibly be time travelers, so they're using the same language. Well, that's very telling. They also said that they believe these entities can improve the lives of everyone on the planet with their technology. But they won't say exactly what these entities are. They're just suggesting what they might be. Is this because these fallen angels and demons are coming into our dimension with increasing frequency? Alice Bailey, the theosophist, wrote that 2025 would be the externalization of the hierarchy. We already know that these people have communications with these entities. All you have to do is read their literature about going down into the underworld or listening to the songs published by their bands and their bards and their knights that talk about astral travel, etc. So I'm going to summarize some of the language used in their propaganda, and the message that they're trying to convey is that we are not alone in the universe, and that there is intelligence that has been on the planet for a long time, but that the frequency is increasing. That's basically the message of this documentary. So, yes, there were suggestions that these were crypto-terrestrial beings. Quote, perhaps ancient civilizations under the earth or from the sea. Possibly time travelers that improve the lives of everyone on the planet with their technology. The key to interstellar travel, which could allow teleportation to the stars, taking humans to the next evolutionary phase. It was stated that humans are not at the top of the food chain, and one of the people in the documentary even compared humans to ants in comparison to these entities. They defined the human race as a violent species and mentioned nuclear weapons, stating that the UAPs were disarming our nuclear weapons and suggested that it could be to keep us from harming ourselves. And one of the actors even said that he believes these entities are trying to demonstrate to humans that we cannot harm them or get in their way. So the main producer and his partner who organized this documentary stated that they did have problems with, quote, religious fundamentalists, extremists, who claim these entities are demonic. They said that they were shocked that anyone would suggest such a ridiculous idea in this documentary. They claim that the DoD was trying to keep them from reporting this information to the American people, but the coronavirus bill caused them to unclassify some of the information. 1947, at the close of World War II and after Roswell, is when the National Security Act and the CIA Act were signed. that keep information classified. But now they're working closely with Congress to reveal what has been classified in secret government programs. And mind you, all these people they are interviewing have worked with the government, and some still do, including politicians. And obviously, they have these people's permission to include their statements in this documentary. They said that we would need international collaboration to face the alien threat. They even aired the infamous Ronald Reagan speech about the same. They said that this is the only issue that has gotten overwhelming bipartisan support. We know that a documentary would not be allowed to be released on Netflix or wherever if all these ex-government people were actually whistleblowing as this is presented. So it's propaganda, definitely, but why? The documentary cinematically and dramatically features all the Freemasonic Washington, D.C. architecture with the main host, Lou Elizondo, who's a terrible actor, positioning himself all over these buildings all around the landscape, the Washington Monument, Capitol, White House, Jefferson Memorial. These buildings are situated within the sacred geometric grid, street grid layout designed by Freemason Pierre L'Enfant. We'll talk about that for a minute. It says his design was based on ancient spiritual wisdom and cosmology. He used circles divided into 5 parts of equal size, resulting in a pentacle used for the street grid layout with the sacred architecture on the 5 points. The 5 points of the pinnacle symbolize ancient cosmology. Remember the Rush album 2112, which had the pentacle inside a circle on the cover, and I said that the pentacle inside the circle always represents witchcraft, which is what ancient cosmology was. And also the Anglican churches in London, designed by Hawksmoor, which were arranged in locations forming a pentagram with ritual significance. Hawksmoor was mentored by Sir Christopher Wren, a founder of the Royal Society, a Rosicrucian, and a member of the Invisible College. Notice that Sir Christopher Wren has a square and compass in his hand. The Royal Society was first called the Invisible College, so the Royal Society and the Invisible College are synonymous. And the Royal Society is the oldest and most respected scientific society in the world. That same sacred geometry and architecture was used in the construction of ancient Rome, Greece, and Egypt. So in this documentary, the claim is that they are pushing for disclosure for, quote, the American people. The speakers were definitely coached to use the same phrases such as the American people and we are not alone in the universe and national security concern. These phrases were repeated at least 10 times or almost 10 times, but by different actors being interviewed, so they were coached. So some of the esoteric signaling that stood out to me was, of course, they have to show a quote by Sir Winston Churchill, the Druid. Sir Winston Churchill was Ancient Order of the Druids. You can look that up. But what does Sir Winston Churchill have to do with any of this? He's not American. He's a Brit. And, he's supposedly dead now and not involved in a UAP program. But the reason they've got him up here is because he's a Druid. Druidic witchcraft practices involving ancient cosmology track back to pre-flood. In the documentary, they also show a spiral staircase several times because spirals represent the axis mundi, or gate of heaven, a link between the spiritual worlds and the occult. So Lou Elizondo said that the hidden hand of the government was concealing the truth about UAPs. He said that runes and hieroglyphs were written on the craft recovered at Roswell. And runes and hieroglyphs are definitely beast system language, possibly fallen angel languages. The quantum physicists interviewed suggested that the way the craft could travel at such high speeds with no sound or method of propulsion is because they were inside an energy bubble that has a space-time barrier like this. So it's an orb. And he said that the energy was drawn from a remote distant source using quantum entanglement, which is spooky action at a distance, like the vampires talked about in the Only Lovers Left Alive occult movie. Quantum entanglement is the theory that particles can communicate over long distances. Another physicist suggests they could be using zero-point energy, which is essentially the empty space of a vacuum acting as a force field, a theory related to cosmology, the expansion of the universe, and dark energy. These are terms used by occult scientists, which are also being experimented with at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. Now I'm going to go over the people. So Lou Elizondo is the main actor in this documentary. And he's been, in the congressional hearings. They make sure we know his face. He's former DOD, military intelligence, and special access. And he was criticizing those who warned that their precious crypto-terrestrials were demonic entities. He's a very bad actor. But I want to list all the Navy people in this propaganda because I find that very telling, considering that the U.S. Navy is the Royal Navy, which I have covered and proven before in other videos. So first, let's look at this Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, the UAP Admiral who I covered before in other videos. Former commander of the NOAA, the one who was paraded around on the news in a popular podcast with the set of a submarine, so like a studio production, definitely not organic interview. And in that, he talked about all kinds of witchy things, including psychedelics and talking to trees, thinking that trees had consciousness, which is definitely a druidic belief. This guy also suggests that these things could be hidden in the ocean. Think Marine Kingdom. This guy was also part of the congressional hearings. So that's Royal Navy Person 1. Royal Navy Person 2 is Jay Stratton, co-producer of the documentary. He was Naval Air Systems Command, former director of the AARO, Defense Intelligence Senior Executive Officer, and Officer of the Secretary of Defense. And he claims that there is a race among governments to reverse engineer alien technology, and that the nation to succeed first will lead for years to come. And that guy was such a bad actor that he was having to read the script when he was talking, and he was such a terrible reader that it was so obvious that at times they had to shoot him from the side of his face. So he, along with the producer Lou Elizondo, were the two making fun of people saying that their precious crypto-terrestrials were demonic entities. Navy Person 3, Commander David Fravor. He was a naval commander, and this guy was in the congressional hearings and interviewed on Joe Rogan podcast, and he gives a little wink in the documentary. So these people are disgusting to me. Naval Person 4, Admiral John Kirby, retired Naval Admiral. Royal Naval Person 5. I'm saying royal. These are all royal. I'm saying the Navy is the Royal Navy, so I'm just going to call them Royal Navy people. So Royal Navy Person 5, James Norman Mattis, a retired Marine Corps 4-star general commissioned in the Marine Corps through the Navy Officers Training Program, 26th U.S. Secretary of Defense. Royal Navy Person 6, Ryan Graves, former lieutenant in the U.S. Navy and a naval pilot. He also appeared in the congressional hearings. He's been featured on many news channels, Politico, 60 Minutes, the History Channel, the New York Times, and Joe Rogan podcast. First chair of the American Institute of Astronauts and Aeronautics. Royal Navy Person 7, Alex Dietrich, Royal Navy Person 8, Mike Flaherty, a retired U.S. Navy intelligence officer who discusses his allegations of biological effects linked to UAPs. Royal Navy Person 9, Colonel Carl Nelson, U.S. Naval Academy graduate who retired from the Navy after more than 33 years of service and 5 commands to begin a new career as a writer and professor, and he is the author of several award-winning novels and nonfiction books. Royal Navy Person 10, Ronald Moultrie, advisor to the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, officer of the CIA who served as Under Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. This guy worked for the NSA and as advisor to the Director of National Intelligence. Royal Navy Person 11, Scott Bray, Director of Naval Intelligence. Now politicians. So the film features several members of Congress, the House, and the Senate. So Anna Paulina Luna, the former stripper, who currently sits in the House of Representatives. Ocasio-Cortez, the bartender who auditioned for her role as politician, literally answering a casting call. Nancy Mace, congresswoman who graduated from the Citadel Military Academy and whose father was U.S. Army Brigadier General. She was also involved in the congressional hearings, and she's the one who looks nothing like her photo here on Wikipedia when she's in those hearings. And I've covered her before in other videos, and that's very weird. Does not look like the same person. Let's see. Chuck Schumer, Senator Charles Warner, Mitt Romney, Adam Schiff, Dan Crenshaw with his eye patch, Kristen Gillibrand, Marco Rubio, who talks about Pearl Harbor and 9/11 in the documentary, Mike Rounds, Tim Burchett, Andre Carlson, Mike Gallagher, and they also talk about Harry Reid a lot, who is not around anymore, but initially sponsored the ATIP program. So other former intelligence community and military officials interviewed about their UFO-related experiences in this documentary include James Clapper, former Director of National Intelligence, Christopher Miller, former Acting Secretary of Defense, John Brennan, former Director of the CIA, Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence from the wealthy, politically connected Mellon family, whose father was insane and committed suicide at age 45 after having been institutionalized, which sounds a lot like demonic possession. Robert Jacobs, former Air Force lieutenant, describes witnessing what he believed to be a UFO disabling a missile in 1964. Bob Salas, retired Air Force captain, recalled an incident in 1967 where a missile system malfunction coincided with the UFO report. David Grush, a former Air Force officer and intelligence official who is making the claims about the secretive special access programs involved in the recovery and reverse engineering of non-human spacecraft. Grush further claims to have viewed documents reporting a spacecraft of alien origin had been recovered by Benito Mussolini's government in 1933 and procured by the U.S. in 1945 with the assistance of the Vatican and the Five Eyes Alliance. And he's also appeared in the congressional hearings. Carl Nell, retired U.S. Army colonel and Northrop Grumman executive. Travis Taylor, PhD quantum physicist who worked at Redstone Arsenal on directed energy weapons systems directly out of high school on a scholarship. He's the star of National Geographic Channel's Rocket City Rednecks. He has written technical papers, science fiction novels, 2 textbooks. He appeared in the documentary When Aliens Attack and is one of the primary investigative scientists on the History Channel's The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. You also have Mike Gold, NASA attorney who specializes in space law. Colonel James Cobb, former U.S. Air Force pilot and NORAD director. Brett Feddersen, formerly of the U.S. National Security Council and director of the FAA. And then some scientists, so-called, that were interviewed. Hal Puthoff, who's a PhD quantum physicist with a focus on the paranormal, specifically remote viewing. Dr. Gary Nolan, who's a Stanford University School of Medicine who worked with the DoD, he talked about the biological effects of coming into contact with alien technology. And we know that a documentary would not be allowed to be released on Netflix if all these ex-government people were actually whistleblowing as this is presented. So it's propaganda, definitely. But why? And why now? Thanks for listening.